nabsa.co.za. For more information, please visit www.bccsa.co.za. Looking for exclusive content, live events, and special broadcasts like the Madlanga Commission? Then connect to the all-new SAfm Connect stream. The Madlanga Commission, live and uninterrupted from 9:30 Monday to Friday. SAfm Connect brings you more of the conversations that matter. Listen anytime, anywhere by visiting connect.safm.co.za or stream directly on SABC Plus at sabc-plus.com. SAfm Connect. More conversations, more access. There's much more coming.
Top Sport with Michael Abramson.
Let's go to some of the voice notes and then I will give you the answer I was looking for tonight.
I think what you can write and jump over it in sport is sand. It's sand.
Mike, you're talking about a header. For an example, athletics, you jump over it. In equestrian, you ride over it.
The answer to the quiz question, I was looking for horse. Those of you who said horse, you're absolutely right. You can ride a horse in various equestrian sports. You can jump over the vault. The vault used to be called the horse in gymnastics. You could jump over it. It's no longer called that because it's now a table. Those of you who said hurdles, you're also right. You can ride hurdles or you can jump over hurdles.
Top Sport on SAfm.
The Daily Discourse on SAfm. Weekday mornings from 9 to 12.
It's 10 after 9 o'clock. A very good morning to you. Welcome to the Daily Discourse. If you feel like you're awake at the wrong time of the day, I don't blame you. I'm Kathy Mutlahlana in on the Daily Discourse for Joanne Joseph today. We're playing a little bit of musical chairs, right, with the programming. But I tell you, it's for a very good reason. We know that we are celebrating Women's Month this month. And part of what we're doing here at the SABC is that we're having special conversations, right? And these are conversations around women, around leadership, and it's called Her Leadership Story Series with the CEO of the SABC. So we'll be having that conversation in the final hour of the show. That's between 11 and 12. And that's why you're actually hearing me between 9 and 12. So I hope that you're going to be calling in on the open line. We'll definitely try and not make it nostalgic, right? And just get into some of the important and key issues of the day. Where I wanted to start things off this morning is actually looking and reflecting on this weekend. We're coming up to an important milestone, and that's 14 years since 34 striking mine workers were shot dead by police at Marikana. And, you know, what we say is that we remember them every August. But the question I really want us to try and grapple with as we get into our open line is asking, what does remembrance mean when accountability still feels unfinished? And this is what I really want us to grapple with and to unpack as we get into the rest of the open line. Also coming up on the show today, South Africans became poorer, and we'll tell you why. But we bought more tax-paid alcohol. So what does that mean? And cancer cases in the country are rising, and the world is being warned that the burden could almost double by 2050. And we're also going to be unpacking women in tech. We're seeing that women are filling tech classrooms, but they're disappearing somewhere along the way before they're actually able to get into those technical jobs or even start occupying positions of leadership in the tech industry. And then we'll also hear from the Human Rights Commission, which says that the collapse of water services is now serious enough to be declared a national disaster. We'll find out why they're making this assertion. So that's just an overview of what's coming up on the show. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to get straight into your open line.
SAfm is streaming live now on Facebook, YouTube, and X at SAfm Radio. The Daily Discourse on SAfm, weekday mornings from 9 to 12.
All right, so it's 13 after 9 o'clock. 34 mine workers were killed by police at Marikana on the 16th of August 2012. I certainly can't believe that it's been 14 years since that fateful day. And we know that going into this weekend, we're going to see a resurfacing of much of that imagery that really came to capture the story of Marikana. We're also going to hear the names of those who died, right? There'll be many speeches that are made in public, but I want us to look at remembrance. What is remembrance without accountability? And can we have a true remembrance that isn't really a ritual that seems to ask nothing of us? And that's because when you go to Marikana today and you speak to residents in Marikana, they still are talking about justice and a need for justice. So what does justice look like for the people of Marikana? We've seen some prosecutions, but certainly not to the extent that we should have. We've seen compensation, and we've seen some improvements, right, in the lives of the community in Marikana. But still, have we had the national reckoning with what the state did on that day and in the build-up to that day? And what does it mean for us to still live with this open wound? And I wonder how that plays out into how we remember Marikana. Those are just some of the reflections I'd like to have from you. The numbers to use this morning, 086 000 2032. That's 086 000 2032. You can send your WhatsApp voice note line on 0614 104 107. And I think remembrance matters, right? Because a country that forgets its wounds is likely to repeat them. And we also know that when we are remembering, we are saying never again. We are saying we know what the lows of our experience as a common people are, and we want to do better than what we have experienced before. And really, the question is, what has changed? What has changed, and who has been held accountable? And remembrance has such a strong moral role, especially in a democratic society. And we have to say that in our remembering, truth must be what leads our remembering. Accountability must be what follows part of that remembering. Change must also be a consequence of remembering. All right, so let me go to the phone lines and take some of your calls. I'm going to start off this morning in Giyani. Loward, good morning to you.
Good morning, Kathy. Welcome back. Again for a brief moment.
Yes, thank you, Loward.
Good, my sister. You know, I'm home as we speak, earlier this year, Limpopo, particularly the Venda and the Mopane regions or districts, they experienced destructive rainfalls, of which we know that there was a crisis for that matter. So, but what I want to say this morning is that we have read in the report that money has been channeled to the Limpopo province to reconstruct the small bridges and regravel the roads. And some of the roads are being regraveled as we speak. I can attest to that, my sister. So, but what I want to challenge the provincial leadership is that they pledged that they are going to be monitoring the utilization of this fund so that every cent has to be accounted for. So I will appeal to our Premier, Opera Matova, to really monitor the developments in terms of the reconstruction of our roads, because the money, 4 billion rand and above, has been channeled to the province. So that's my main point for this
Okay,
moment.
all right. An important point, Lowered. Thanks for that. So you want to see accountability and transparency in as far as the spending of the monies allocated for disaster relief are concerned, especially where you have the declaration of a national disaster, even a provincial disaster, as what Lowered is referring to. KD, you're in the Northern Cape. Good morning. Yes, KD.
As we remember, Marikana, it was tragic. It happened under a black government, and the people implicated, like Cyril Ramaphosa, have come into power. But it's painful also because the miners themselves did kill policemen burning him to death. So we remember that day. But what I want to focus today is the integrity of journalists. Recently, I was watching a man called Tucker Carlson. He was interviewing a lady who is a journalist.
You were watching a gentleman called who?
Tucker Carlson.
Okay.
Yes. So he was talking to a lady who is a journalist, and this lady was relaying how, as a journalist, there are untrustworthy elements in journalism, to the point that some can be deployed to defend certain things and to speak lies directly to the public in England, in America. And I bring it to our shows here. That I see sometimes journalists will start as investigative journalists or like you, public stations. Then they switch to go and speak for government and become government officials. And I'm asking myself, really, is journalism going to sustain itself and maintain integrity if journalists can be in private and serving the politicians? I don't think it's going to.
Yeah, look, I think that there are two things there, KD. The first one, right, is about the integrity of the single individual and the extent the newsroom process itself is able to really refine or to process information to the extent that even if I have my own individual views or my own biases, which we all carry, by the way, there are processes and steps within a newsroom that are there as safeguards to the integrity of the information that ultimately is, disseminated to the public. And in a country like South Africa, we also have the press ombudsman, we have the press council. All of these institutions exist for that very reason, to ensure that there's integrity within the journalistic sector, so that if for whatever reason the newsroom itself, you're going through editors, you're going through those that are going to be proofreading stories, making sure that the facts of the story check out. Excuse me. So if for whatever reason what is going on in the newsroom fails the test, there are these external bodies that also are able to bring in an additional level of accountability. So I don't know that a single person with a single view or ideas or narrative can just move from having false ideas, having incorrect information, and having that disseminated at a wide scale without it being challenged. That's not how the system is created, KD. But on the part of journalists becoming spokespeople for different organizations, that's part of the reality, I think, of what happens in newsrooms and generally people being at different points in their lives and making different decisions about what their careers should look like. And worse so now that the industry is facing the kind of challenges that it is. Many journalists, yes, they have jobs, they don't have medical aid, they don't have pension funds, and it's becoming more and more precarious to be a journalist, is the reality of the situation. So sometimes it's just about people choosing a path that allows them more secure employment. KD?
I think that maybe even these stories about brown envelopes and the fact that they are human beings, and that ultimately, though, there are people who own these media companies. And if they have a certain agenda, that maybe, let's say, we are going to push a certain narrative, a journalist will not have much of a choice. So I think that the integrity of journalists is something that we should pursue to a higher degree than we are doing.
I don't disagree with you, KD. I agree with you 100%. And you'll find that newsrooms themselves are very robust places, hey? These are spaces where there are debates taking place every single day. Journalists are arguing about angles that they're putting out on air. They're arguing about interviews. You know, we've spoken to this person. Why haven't we spoken to that person? So that very much is still part of what happens. But that's why it's important that we fight as a society for the independence of newsrooms, for the independence of editors, and also just to try and keep the commercialization imperatives of, media institutions, in particular newsrooms, away from editorial. Because once there's that conflation, that's where you begin to see some serious problems. But I take what you're saying, KD. Thanks for calling in.
Okay.
Wonga, you're in Matatiele. Good morning.
Good morning, KT, and good morning to SAfm listeners.
Yes, Wonga.
You know, KT, there's a tender corruption here that is very dirty. I will continue exposing it. On the 20th of July, they posted a tender advert. Then on the 24th, that tender was closed. But on the system, it has been running since the 24th of July until I've reported it yesterday to another platform. Then today I woke up, they have removed it. But by the 1st of July, by the 1st of August, they already awarded that. So it was a deceiving situation, and it was, I don't know whether we call it a propaganda information to those that were hoping that they were still going to be called or to be given letters of intention. Lastly, Katie, there's also a tender of cleaning the town. It's worth about 3.6 million. It was closed on 28 May. 29 June, 29 July, 29 August. Once it lapses, it is going to lapse in the next coming few days because it will be the 29th of August. Mm-hmm. The reason why they are making it lapse is because certain managers who are interested in these tenders want this to lapse because whoever they are betting on has a higher price and they cannot award it before that particular day. So they want it to lapse. Then after that, they go to re-advert again, which is going to be a rip-off to those who will buy tender documents, but a money to the municipality.
Mm. So how are you addressing this, Wonga? Because I know you also sit in council.
I'm addressing it in council, ANC majority, they'll never respond. Management, they don't respond. You write it to the managers, they don't respond. You write it to MEC, it doesn't respond. You write it to the office of Minister of Culture, Minister Savisa, then they respond. But no action is being taken.
Yeah. All right. Okay, Wonga. Thanks for raising that issue with us. It is an important issue. And as you always do, Wonga, please do share some of the details that you might have about that so that we're able to follow it up a little bit further. 28 after 9 o'clock. Time goes by so quickly when you're having fun. Let's bring in some of your WhatsApp voice notes. It'll lead us into the 9:30 news headlines.
Good morning, Kate and SAfm listeners. We are being very unfair here, Kate, on the issue of Marikana. Because if it wasn't the miners who killed the security guards before, there was not going to be any shootout from the police. But the miners were the ones who killed people first. But why are we only focusing on miners being killed? Yet the miners were the ones who caused the situation to be tense. Can anyone explain that? Thank you, James Transpe.
Good morning, Honorable Kate Muhlatlan, and good morning to honorable listeners. Nice to hear your voice again. Kate Muhlatlan, I just want to say congratulations to Banyana, the ladies. What I want to say, people of Nigeria are talking too much on social media. They play the football on social media too much. They are same WhatsApp group like Kaizer Chiefs fans. They are playing the football on social media, but on the field, nothing they produce. Congratulations, Banyana. People of Nigeria, join Kaizer Chiefs. We are same WhatsApp group. You are talking too much.
Good morning, Siskati Mbongo Sundi Samboyi Isai. Siskati, I totally agree with Norman from Brixton. What are these old men still doing in Parliament from the ANC? That Ramaphosa, I think is 76 now, and then Gwede Mantashe, old man, and then Njimuteka Gogo, who can't be struggling even to walk because of age. Man, these people, they don't have vision for this country. They don't want South Africa to succeed. Like, why are they not retiring? They are old. Just go look after your grandchildren. Enough now. You.
Good morning, I'm Anne Musa. In the headlines, National Coloured Congress Member of Parliament Fadil Adams is expected to appear in the Pinetown Magistrates Court in KwaZulu-Natal today. Adams is facing 3 charges of fraud and 2 charges of defeating the ends of justice. KwaZulu-Natal authorities say a suspected kingpin linked to the theft of road safety barriers worth millions of rand has been arrested in Jacobs, south of Durban. And government says South Africa's new electronic travel authorization system will help unlock key tourism markets such as China and India, where visa processes previously discouraged travelers. I'll have details on these and other stories at 10.
He is the Motswako King, and he is coming home to the Northwest. She is the airwaves queen, presiding this Women's Month at the Palace, bringing the stars Focalistic, Dengane, Ladla Mshungisi, and more. Step into the Now Now universe with your hosts, Casper Nyobest and Zanele Potelwa. Live at Sun City, 15th August on SABC1 at 8 p.m. Summer 32, the future sounds like Now Now. She leads SASCOC. She carries South Africa's sporting ambitions. But who is Nozipho Jafta, the woman behind the title? This Friday, Kathy Mutlatlana and SABC Group CEO Nomsa Chabeli go beyond the boardroom for an intimate Women's Month conversation about leadership, resilience, ambition, and what it takes to lead. The Daily Discourse from 9 to 12. Beyond the title, beyond the achievement, meet the women on SAfm, still leading the conversations that move us. Every generation has a story. Every generation has questions. Every generation has a voice. For 90 years, SAfm has been part of the conversation. This August, we listen back to the voices that brought us here. We celebrate the people who shaped our journey, and we listen for the voices that will shape what comes next, including the launch of a new annual SAfm property. This Women's Month, we are in search of an SAfm woman. 4 extraordinary women, 4 extraordinary journeys. One question: what does it mean to be an SAfm woman? SAfm 90 years. Women, a new voice. 90 years of conversation. A nation story, our shared future. From 1 August, SAfm. SAfm is streaming live now on Facebook, YouTube, and X at SAfm Radio.
You're tuned in to the Daily Discourse.
The Daily Discourse on SAfm, weekday mornings from 9 to 12.
You tuned in to the Daily Discourse with myself, Kathy Mutlatlana, in for Joanne Joseph today. And it is part of the special broadcast that we're going to be bringing you every Friday, right? Her Leadership Story Conversations is a series that is being kicked off. We started off last week with a conversation between Joanne and the Group CEO of the SABC, Nomsa, Chabeli. And today we're going to be continuing that conversation with the CEO of the SABC and the CEO of SASCOC. It's part of our Women's Month coverage here at the National Broadcaster. So that conversation coming up at 11 o'clock. For now, we're going to continue taking some of your calls. Sintu, you've been holding on the line. Good morning to you.
Yes, how are you, my dear sister?
Doing well, Sintu. What do you want to talk about?
Okay.
Yeah, that giggle. Be on your best behavior, please, Sintu. I know it's hard. You must be on your best behavior.
No, that's fine. Listen, man, Casey, you'll recall that at the beginning of the year, I told you about the lack of services, especially in ambulance in my area in Eastern Cape.
Yes.
Under Inokom Kichima municipality. You see? Now, last week I had an opportunity to go home again, only to find out that it has been 3 weeks now since the people of that area have not been having those services, the ambulance. You see? Now, remember that we do not have a 24-hour clinic there which can be able to service our own people. And that ambulance, which is one, is also servicing the farms nearby the town. You see? And also people are not taking their medication. They cannot go for their consultation in Cradock because we are using Cradock as our own main hospital, you see. And then we must also, I told you last time that we must also get a permission from Queenstown to get an ambulance. And yesterday I sent a message to the MEC, Kappa, in the Eastern Cape. And then she promised, okay, I will wait. Maybe she promised to revert back to me. But it was not the first time when I'm raising this serious matter regarding the plight of those people. You see? Because people are dying there. When there's violence, people are stabbed. The ambulance takes time, 2 to 3 hours, to reach the person that is requiring to get an ambulance. I don't know what intervention.
I think let's do this. Let's do this. Let me put you back through to Kineilwe, who's just on the line, and she's manning the desk. She's going to take more details of this, and we'll see if we can't follow it up on Municipal Watch, perhaps in the coming week, because it is an important story that you're raising, and they've long been issues in the Inokom Gijima municipality, and we all know about some of the scandals that that particular municipality has had in the last couple of years. So, Sintu, we're going to leave it there. Unfortunately, that's also where we're going to round it up with taking your calls. Coming up after this break, we're going to look at an interesting study that has been done by the University of Cape Town, and in particular, around alcohol usage of South Africans, but whether South Africans are actually consuming alcohol from the illicit market or whether they're consuming alcohol bought within the legal alcohol market. That's coming up shortly. I don't have comms. I can't hear Patrick.
SAfm is
He's not talking
live
to me.
now on Facebook, YouTube, and X at SAfm Radio. The Daily Discourse on SAfm, weekday mornings from 9 to 12.
Well, South Africans had less money in real terms between 2017 and 2024, yet consumption of tax-paid alcohol per person went up. UCT economist Corné van Valbeek says that finding directly challenges the industry's claim that illicit alcohol expanded by 55% as consumers abandoned legal products. So whose numbers should we and the Treasury trust as it considers higher excise taxes, and would also and when we look at it, would that mean that another increase would reduce harm or simply change where people buy? Prof. Corné, good morning. Thanks for your time this morning.
Yes, good morning, ma'am. It's lovely being on the show.
I want us to start firstly with the context of this research. What was the intention of it?
So just a bit of background. In November 2024, the National Treasury came out with a document that basically said they want to revise the excise tax system on alcohol specifically, and they want to basically increase the excise taxes on beer and on wine potentially quite significantly in future. So the response by the industry was to commission a report by an organization called Euromonitor that then looked into the illicit trade in alcohol products. And the main finding of this Euromonitor report is that between 2017 and 2024, illicit alcohol had increased by 55%, which is a substantial increase. We looked into that document in great detail and we said, let's try and understand where do these numbers come from. And essentially what we found is these numbers are basically coming out of thin air. They did a research, but the research does not quantify anything. It just asks people different opinions and so on. And eventually they came out with a very glossy and very fancy report. But in our opinion, these numbers are essentially unverifiable and come from nowhere. So we then did some additional work and we said, well, let's have a look at a mature market, a market like, for instance, cigarettes. In cigarettes, we know that there's a massive problem with illicit trade. Up to 60% or even more of cigarettes are being sold illicitly in South Africa. And we looked at how has that illicit trade affected the legal market. And the legal market has shrunk dramatically over the past 15 years since about 2010, and especially after the drama at SARS in 2014 to 2018, and even more so after the very ill-advised tobacco sales ban in 2020. So what we are seeing is if there's an increase in illicit trade, there's going to be a decrease in the legal market. We also did the same analysis for alcohol. And what we found is that between 2017 and 2024, the legal market of alcohol has increased in the order of 24%. In other words, 24% more alcohol is being consumed in aggregate in 2024 than in 2017.
Sure.
So what happens, what that means in per capita terms, in other words, per head of the population, approximately 8 to 10% more alcohol has been consumed between 2017 and 2024. So that is legal alcohol. It's not illicit alcohol. And this is within the context of Yes.
Yeah, go ahead. You can just conclude that thought. That's fine.
This is within the context of a poor economic performance. Per capita GDP is down by nearly 5%. Disposable income of households is down by 1.5% in inflation-adjusted or real terms. So it really doesn't make much sense that there's going to be, over and above this very substantial increase in legal alcohol, there's also a massive increase in illicit alcohol. That 55% is the number that we challenge. We say that 55% is simply not credible. It's not credible in terms of how you got the number, and it simply doesn't make any logical sense.
I'm listening to part of just the research and how you're unpacking it. And one of the concerns, of course, and this is just a general one, is around the increase of consumption of legal alcohol while incomes per person have fallen, right? And I wonder what that is telling us. And perhaps is the data also able to say whether the increase in alcohol consumption was just limited to legal alcohol, or is it also possible that there's also been an increase in the consumption of alcohol that is illegally sold? Could both those things be true?
So let's look at it from a perspective of logicality. We know that estimating illicit anything is very, very hard. It's very hard to get a precise handle on the illicit drug market or the illicit cigarette market or, in this instance, the illicit alcohol market, simply because illicit is, by definition, it's hidden, it's not out in the open and so on. What we do know is legal consumption is very easily measured, and it's measured specifically by the National Treasury, and we can work through their numbers and see what is happening to legal consumption. The incentive for the alcohol industry is to say we want to discourage the government from increasing the excise tax. And they bring up this monster called illicit trade. And this monster of illicit trade is being made much bigger than what it logically actually is. So we don't say how much the illicit market in alcohol is. We just haven't done the research. We don't have the resources to be able to do that. It's an incredibly hard thing to do. So what the industry has done is they have commissioned a credible organization called Euromonitor to write this report for them. We've read the report in detail, and this report essentially gives very precise numbers, but doesn't tell us at all how these numbers were derived. So it is our contention that in this environment where, on the one hand, you've got a decreasing economic performance, people are literally becoming poorer over the last 7 years. On the other hand, you've got prices of alcohol that have remained in real terms more or less the same. What we mean by in real terms, by inflation-adjusted terms, they have remained more or less the same. And we're also living in an international environment where internationally we see that the sale of alcohol is going down as younger generations are drinking less.
So then, Prof, if we're to take what you're saying, because yours is to refute the data, to say that, in fact, alcohol has not, the illicit alcohol trade has not expanded by 55%, because here's evidence of all the people that are still buying alcohol legally. But in the same breath, you say that there's no way, at least for you, that you could account for what is happening in the illicit market. So therefore, if we come back to that idea of logic, it's not completely unfounded that the legal market and the illicit market could both be growing at the same time.
I would say if one looks at the balance of probabilities, it is seriously unlikely that there's a massive growth, a substantial growth in the legal market, and at the same time there's a huge increase in the illicit market. We have not seen that for cigarettes. In cigarettes, we saw a huge increase in illicit sales, And at the same time, there was a decrease in legal sales. That makes logical sense, just from a logicality point of view. If you were to argue that there's going to be an increase in legal sales of alcohol and a massive increase in illicit sales of alcohol, essentially what we are saying is we are drinking like fish. We are really
Are we not?
increasing our alcohol consumption dramatically. We are drinking like fish. But the point over
Exactly.
here is not... the point is not whether there is an illicit alcohol market. We are not denying that there is an illicit alcohol market. What we are disputing is the growth in the
Okay.
illicit alcohol.
All right. All right.
And I think to say that there is an illicit market, we agree with that. But
Okay.
to say that that illicit market has grown as substantially as what it has, that we found very, very hard to believe.
Yeah, look, I imagine the research is useful for the industry, but it sounds to me that more broadly, everybody's still on really shaky ground simply due to the amount of assumptions that are being made. Let me bring in a call. Lireng, you're in Cape Town. Good morning.
Good morning, Kathy, and good morning, Prof. I tend to disagree with what Prof and the study, because what they did between 2017 and 2024, we have seen what we call an influx of what we call RTD, ready to drink, which is convenience and all that. At that particular time, it spiked because people were fascinated and getting kind of introduced to something completely different. However, after that, it gone down because the very same ready-to-drink were now being manufactured illegally and all that, which is now has actually spiked the illicit trading. So here's him in the industry, and I own the product. That my product at the moment has been what do you call it? Been elicited and thing, and our sales have dropped by over 50%. But the product is out there and being consumed. So yes and no, but I strongly believe that his research is very one-sided.
So Lireng, what are you saying? Are you saying that there is a likelihood that both the consumption of illegally and legally bought alcohol has gone up?
Absolutely, yes. That's what is happening, because what you do, Kathy, when the new product comes in, everyone else will go there and introduce the products to the market. But eventually, that product will start being consumed illegally or manufactured illegally somewhere. So you'll see the very same thing that going not really parallel. Actually, the illegal one will go even more higher because it will be slightly cheaper than what you're consuming and everything else. But out there, somebody was thinking that it's the same product.
All right. Thanks for that contribution. Prof, it sounds to me like this is just the tip of the iceberg. And I know that, of course, you were conducting the study for industry, but is there a possibility that you're going to expand on the work that you've done already, just very briefly, so that we have a more comprehensive view of what is happening in the sector?
Yeah, it's a very interesting comment by Lireng, and I appreciate that comment. I think what I want to mention is the alcohol market is not static. It changes very dramatically from year to year and from sort of period to period. And his comments about the ready-to-drink market is very, very valid, and that is there is a significant market for RTD drinks in the alcohol space, and it has grown very sharply. And we see that in the official figures. In other words, for figures that have been actually fully tax-paid figures over there. We also know that for certain spirits, gin has become very, very popular over the last number of years where it was not. And other spirits have decreased in popularity. So all those aspects are there. In terms of, if I am now quoting from the Euromonitor report, and from other research that they have done, not me, all right? And I'm just quoting.
All right, very briefly, please, Prof.
According to them, I will. The main issue in terms of illicit trade, according to Euromonitor, is not in beer, it's not in wine, it's primarily in spirits, all right? And some spirits, of course, also go into ready-to-drink drinks. But that is where the pressure point is primarily, according to Euromonitor.
All right.
That's not the research that we've done. We are just disputing the overall figures.
Prof, we're going to have to leave it there. Professor Corne van Walbeek, UCT School of Economics and Director, Research Unit on the Economics of Accessible Products. Thank you.
The Daily Discourse on SAfm, weekday mornings from 9 to 12.
Well, let's turn our attention to this story now. The World Health Organization is warning that annual cancer cases could rise to nearly 35 million by 2050. In South Africa, breast and cervical cancer remain the leading invasive cancers reported among women, while prostate cancer is the main leading cancer among men. The danger, of course, is not only the diagnosis, it's in how late many people are diagnosed and whether they can reach screening earlier, which of course means that early treatment can increase chances of going into remission. Lorraine Govender is from Cancer and joins us now. She is the National Health Programs Manager there. Lorraine, good morning to you. Thanks for your time. You know, this research is, I would say it's really not surprising because more and more one feels like within their immediate circle, there's always news of somebody that you know, a friend of a friend who has a relative, who has a friend that is being diagnosed with cancer. So that means that the idea of the number of cancer diagnoses going up is not only perceived, it's happening real time.
Good morning, Kathy, and good morning to the SAfm listeners, and thank you so much for having us on the station this morning. And yes, it's an interesting topic. So yes, definitely we are seeing a steady rise in cancer cases in South Africa. And while some of this is because people are living longer, there's also the lifestyle-related risk factors and persistent gaps in risk reduction and early diagnosis are contributing significantly to this rise. So you're absolutely right. Early diagnosis is definitely the key.
What is driving this increase in cancer cases?
So it's definitely, we are seeing people living longer. So, in South Africa, if we just look at South Africa, our population is growing. There's an increase in life expectancy. And then, your earlier topic focused on alcohol. We're definitely seeing factors like increase in tobacco use, alcohol consumption. And, in South Africa, there's a lot of conversation around, obesity. We also have the situation of poor diet. We're not eating proper meals, balanced meals. And then there's also the physical inactivity, work pressures. We're often sitting for long periods behind our desk. So all of those things. And then, we can also say when we look at the increase in cancer cases, we also like to look at it from improved early detection and reporting systems. So, we also have the National Cancer Registry that records our cancer stats. So, this is some of the stats that's coming out to show an increase. So, yes, those are the factors, but definitely, there's more education and awareness and more people are becoming aware of it. However, it's still the late diagnosis that's a concern.
I was going to say, do you think that there is enough awareness around the lifestyle-induced risks for cancer across the different age groups? Because you talk about people living longer and aging as one of the risk factors. But the reality is that if that were a significant driver of cancer, then you'd only have mostly the elderly that are being diagnosed. But that's not what is happening. We're seeing, young people in their 40s, in their 50s, dying to cancer.
Yeah, most definitely. And, I want to just touch on one of the cancers that is a concern currently, and that's colorectal cancer. Because we are seeing more and more of these cases in younger people than before. So, I think becoming aware of the fact that, it's not only the elderly that will be getting cancer, but also younger people. And we want people to become more and more aware of the signs and symptoms, especially around colon cancer. Because, yes, there are lifestyle-related factors that I've alluded to earlier on that results in this cancer. And yes, lifestyle-related cancers is not just only colorectal cancer, but our lifestyle is related to so many other cancers, like what you just mentioned earlier on. Breast cancer, yes, it's lifestyle, it's obesity, it's tobacco use. Cervical cancer, we know HPV infections, persistent infections, our compromised immune system definitely leads to this, and lung cancer as well. If you look at it, smoking is one of the attributable factors to this. So, Kathy, I want to stress that, our lifestyle certainly contributes to an increase in some of these cancer cases.
So if then we are to look at how we begin to put power in the hands of ordinary people, what should people know? What should they not be ignoring with their health, especially where they might be experiencing persistent symptoms?
Yeah, I think to start off with, communities need to understand that cancer does not only affect older people, and some cancers can be prevented or successfully treated. And again, looking at the risk factors that we spoke about earlier on, not smoking, limiting your alcohol intake, maintaining a healthy weight, regular exercise, eating diets rich in fruit, vegetables, and fiber, the HPV vaccine. Kathy, imagine we can totally get rid of cervical cancer through the HPV vaccine. Women shouldn't be dying of this cancer, but yet, we restrict the girls from going and having this vaccine. And then again, participating in screening programs, seeking medical attention when symptoms arise. The message I want to drive is awareness saves lives. The more informed people are about symptoms, risk factors, and screening opportunities, the better chances of early diagnosis and successful treatment. Now, except for those cancers that we spoke about, we haven't spoken about skin cancer. Melanoma is also on the increase. And at the Cancer Association, we do have screening devices available. But, Kathy, the strange thing is people are not coming in for the screenings. They're not, it's maybe a small donation that we will ask for the screening. But at the end of it, it can save your life. And yes, the public sector also has screening available. And I know many governmental departments are struggling to reach the figures, for example, cervical cancer screening. Why? Because people are not accessing this.
Okay.
So I think the message is definitely, please go in for screening.
Absolutely. Lorraine Govender, National Manager, Health Programs at Cancer. Do go in for screenings. Do not take chances, right? And do not delay, because the earlier it's detected, then the better the chances again of starting treatment early. One of the big issues that we're facing is around our mortality rate that is linked to cancer. So the number of people that are dying from cancer, that in some instances whose lives could have been saved if it had been detected earlier. It's just after 10 o'clock, time for your latest news update. I need...
In our top stories, Fadil Adams' case transferred to a regional court and suspected road barrier theft kingpin arrested in Durban crackdown. Good morning. We start with breaking news. Northwest businessman Suleiman Karim is not likely to appear before the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry in Pretoria this morning. Evidence leader, Advocate Adila Hassim, has proposed that the Commission draw its findings on matters relating to Karim from the evidence it currently has. Karim's appearance has been postponed several times due to ongoing claims of ill health. The case involving National Coloured Congress Member of Parliament Fadil Adams has been transferred from the Pinetown Magistrates Court to the Regional Court. The matter is scheduled to continue on the 11th of next month. Adams faces charges linked to alleged visits to 2 detainees at Durban's Westville prison while their cases were still before the courts. Both have since been convicted. Adams was arrested in May and granted bail of 10,000 rand. The case was postponed to today for further investigation. KwaZulu-Natal authorities say a suspected kingpin linked to the theft of road safety barriers worth millions of rand has been arrested in Jacobs, south of Durban. The arrest follows an intelligence-driven operation targeting a criminal syndicate responsible for stealing the safety barriers across the province's road network. Transport MEC spokesperson Ndabezinhle Sibiya.
After noticing that guardrails worth millions of rands continually being stolen from our 34,000 kilometer road network, the MEC assigned a team to launch an investigation. He has reported that a suspected kingpin who owns a company, a warehouse, has been arrested. The owner was identified by his runners who were arrested last week following an intelligence-driven #Nzani liaison operation. He was nabbed in Jacobs and is currently in police custody.
Government says South Africa's new electronic travel authorization system will help unlock key tourism markets such as China and India, where visa processes previously discouraged travellers. Tourism Minister Patricia de Lille says the system will make it easier and faster for tourists to enter the country. Travellers can now apply online and receive a response within 24 hours. De Lille was speaking during the launch of Tourism Month in Durban yesterday.
The big source markets that we are focusing on is India, China, Mexico, and Indonesia. And we need to flood those markets to show them it's now easier to come to South Africa. We need to have that video of Home Affairs that is in English, how to access the ETA.
The University of Mpumalanga has rejected allegations that it gives preference to foreign nationals over South African citizens in its recruitment processes. The university has come under scrutiny following a parliamentary oversight visit, as well as claims circulating on social media that foreign nationals are being prioritized for employment opportunities. The institution says it fully complies with both the Employment Services Act and the Immigrations Act in its hiring processes. It has, however, conceded it's working on reviewing its appointment policy to improve the search from the domestic labour market. The university's Tlangelani Ubisi.
What we're doing, we said, look, we're going to review our appointment policy so that it becomes a pre-requirement. For instance, especially issues around the extensive search of the domestic labor market before we can be able to say, look, we couldn't find such a skill in the country. Overall, we're comfortable from where we sit. We had already even started the process before the visit by the portfolio committee. But we believe that it will strengthen our recruitment processes.
Recapping the top story, Northwest businessman Suleiman Karim is not likely to appear before the Matlanga Commission of Inquiry in Pretoria this morning. Evidence leader, Advocate Adila Hassim, has proposed that the Commission draw its findings on matters relating to Karim from the evidence it currently has. For SAfm News, I am Anne Musam.
She leads SASCOC. She carries South Africa's sporting ambitions. But who is Nozipho Jafta, the woman behind the title? This Friday, Kathy Mutlatlana and SABC Group CEO Nomsa Chabeli go beyond the boardroom for an intimate Women's Month conversation about leadership, resilience, ambition, and what it takes to lead. The Daily Discourse from 9 to 12. Beyond the title, beyond the achievement. Meet the women on SAfm, still leading the conversations that move us. Catch the Mzansi's Beautiful Game Sport documentary.
For me, Neto, really, in the club football, where I've played a lot of my football to the ladies, at times I would play as a striker.
From the 5th of July to the 23rd of August 2026.
Banyana performance is like Bafana's performance right now at the moment. So we believe in them and we're proud of them. What they did, they did wonders to the country.
Brought to you by the SAFM's award-winning drama department. Ala Bafana Bafana. This is what we are becoming. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us. Wherever you are in the world, SAFM 104 to 107 is accessible. We're also streaming live on Facebook, X, and YouTube at SAFM Radio. We acknowledge and appreciate everyone tuning in and watching our streams. Stay with SAFM 104 to 107 as we bring you commission live, breaking stories, and thought-provoking lectures. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us.
With the ever-changing financial landscape, it can be difficult to make sense of all the moves at times. Join me, Jimmy Moyaha, on the SAFM Market Update with MoneyWeb, Mondays to Thursdays, 6 to 7 p.m, as we break down the key market trends, top financial stories, and smart investment insights, all in one place. It's everything you need to stay financially informed and ahead of the curve.
The soundtrack of your life with Ernest Pillay.
Some songs take you back instantly to your first love, a road trip, or just simpler times. The soundtrack of your life with me, Ernest Pillay, is where timeless hits and forgotten favorites come together to tell your story. It's not just music, it's memories, moments, and the meaning behind this jam. Rediscover the songs that shaped your journey. Tune in to The Soundtrack of Your Life with me, Ernest Pillay, Saturdays and Sundays, 1 to 4 p.m, only on SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide.
SAFM has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Under the code, we are committed to giving news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that is not harmful, does not amount to hate speech, or contain violence or explicit sex. If you think we are not living up to that code, then you can inform the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Direct any complaints in writing to the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. PO Box 142365. Craig Hall 2024. Fax to 011-326-3198 or an email to bccsa@nabsa.co.za. For more information, please visit www.bccsa.co.za. Let's have the conversation. WhatsApp voice notes on 0614 104 107.
Hearers of the station. Hey, I do agree with the listener was calling just now. Hey, I love Angie Motsecha and Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. I love them. But I noticed yesterday, hey, Angie Motsecha can't walk. She must get herself tickets for women, man. Hey. She can't. A soldier can't walk. Tusi from Inanda. Bye.
Good morning, Kathy. And your team, Happy Women's Man. Welcome back. Kathy, this issue of Marikana, it's a movie. If you dig deep there, you find out some of the politicians, they call the police must go to protect their mind. So no one is going to account there. Our politicians, they can't fight them, they can't do nothing because of their interest. Some of them are the directors, some of them are the one who supply mine with tools. So, It is a certain thing because of their interest. That is why you can see move on the issue of Marikana. Especially again, they think it happened in Northwest. There is nothing functioning in this province. Service delivery, we don't know what is a service delivery. So when we see those things, we know it. No one is going to account. Keep it. See, Mohamed Losana.
Katie, if you have a problem with a journalist in print, you take that to the ombudsman or ombudsperson. And if you have a problem with a journalist in broadcast, you can take that to BCCSA. That's clear. But if it's a spokesperson, where do you take that? Because my belief is that we are all communication practitioners with spokespersons and journalists. That's where I am getting confused. Thank you. Butinkongi Bonafide, the son of Indo in the Eastern Cape.
SAfm is streaming live now on Facebook, YouTube, and X at SAfm Radio. The Daily Discourse, more than talk, real understanding.
You're listening to the Daily Discourse. It's 13 after 10 o'clock. Kathy Mutlatlana in for Joanne Joseph, and a part of it really about the special coverage that we are bringing you for Women's Month. Joanne is out for the day, but of course the conversation and the programming in terms of the conversations, particularly in the 11 o'clock hour, her story, her leadership story series run in collaboration with the group CEO of the SABC. That is going to be continuing. So we needed to have an all-women and all-female panel. So you should definitely tune in to that. Today we're going to be in conversation with the CEO of SASCOC. Before we get to it, however, there's still plenty of coverage coming up in this hour. And we want to start off looking at the case of Marikana and this question of accountability, right? And we're marking 14 years still since that massacre. Christopher Rutledge is the Executive Director of Mining Affected Communities United in Action. Christopher, good morning to you. Thanks for your time this morning.
Hi, good morning. Thanks very much for having me. Just to be sure, I'm the director of the advice office, the Makua advice office.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks for that, Christopher. We're talking about remembrance this morning and what remembering looks like, especially where there still remain so many questions that have been unanswered. And from you as an organization that has been doing work with families, with the community of Marikana, what would you say remembering looks like to you?
Kathy, yes, that's a question that we ourselves have been pondering. 14 years later, we still haven't seen any justice. So, as an organization, we ask ourselves the question: so, what does that really mean? What is that saying to us? 14 years, and nobody's been prosecuted, nobody's been held accountable. In fact, quite the opposite has happened. The individual by the name of Cyril Ramaphosa, who was on the board and who had called for concomitant action against the miners at the time, he's not been held accountable in any way. In fact, quite the opposite has happened. He's ascended to the highest position in the country. So it begs the question because, Makua was formed directly as a result of what happened in Marikana, where communities came together after that and realized that the state was increasingly acting in the interest of big corporations, mining companies, leaving the poorest of the poor, marginalized communities like ourselves out of the equation. And so, the question then of who the state represents and whose interest it looks after is one that occupies us on a regular basis. And, we've come to the conclusion that ultimately what Marikana must mean for us is that we must, one, have seen the truth of what we are faced with. We are faced with a state that is increasingly only interested in protecting the interest of capital, and communities don't really have anybody that's going to come and save them. So it's only communities themselves who can act in their own interest. And therefore, Makua organizes at the grassroots level. We build branches, we build the capacity of communities to collect evidence, to hold those in power to account. And we're saying that that's the only way that we can really remember and make sure that Marikana was not something that is going to disappear into the annals of history without any impact on our society.
So Christopher, I want to go back to what you said in relation to accountability, because you singled out the president, and you spoke about the fact that there has been no clear action, right, coming out of that Farlam Commission. And what we know that the Farlam Commission recommended, it didn't recommend that he be prosecuted. It didn't recommend that he be investigated. It didn't even recommend that he be disciplined. So what is it in particular that you are speaking about in relation to the president where you feel there is unfinished business there? Because you, of course, then have a whole host of individuals that were recommended for investigation, that were recommended for action, and in some instances, we've seen very little movement on that.
Yeah. No, indeed. So our understanding of that is also connected to the experiences of mining-affected communities in the 14 years since the formation of Makua and since the massacre at Marikana. We have tried to engage those in authority in various ways. We've written, we've protested, we've done everything. Even today, we have submitted a petition to Parliament, and Parliament has simply just ignored it. We are now in the background still trying to engage Parliament to get them to deal with this, because we are seeing, our experiences is that marginalized people have no value in our society. The fact that these men could be massacred
Yes, Christopher?
particularly, sorry?
Yes, please repeat
Hello?
that. Yeah, please repeat that.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not sure where I
The fact that, we lost you at the fact that?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure where I left off, Kathy, but let me just say that, the fact that nobody's been prosecuted, nobody's been held to account, not even at the highest levels. Now, the fact that the president himself was cleared by the Farlam Commission says a lot about how power is viewed in society, how those in power are viewed, as opposed to those who are, at the bottom of the rung when it comes to power, communities, marginalized workers. And so you see one set of legal application when it comes to Cyril Ramaphosa, and you see another when it comes to a poor black miner who is trying to eke out a living. So this reality in our society is not only in Marikana. We experience that every single day, in every opportunity, every door we knock on, every petition we send, every request we make. We see that the way that poor people are listened to is not the same as the way that when Cyril Ramaphosa says we need concomitant action, suddenly the might of the state is mobilized and people are gunned down. Or when Gwede Mantashe says, these people are criminals, then we starve 93 people to death and nobody says a word and nobody's held accountable. So the way that the rich and the powerful are treated in our society, the access to justice that they have, as opposed to the access to justice of communities is absolutely, part of the problem.
So of course, part of the challenge that we have, Christopher, is that going back to what happened in Marikana, and the context of that story has to always be taken in its entirety, right? And that's what the Farlam Commission really urged us to do as a society, that yes, there was this very strong language that was used in that email. It has raised certain questions which are not yet settled, right? And those deal with the political and the moral argument around the language of the president, his influence, and both the position he held as a senior figure of the ANC and at the time as a Lonmin director. So all of those things speak to what you've just touched on. But at the same time, it also made a finding that he cannot and should not be held responsible for the fact that that massacre took place in the first place. And when we speak about action in Marikana, and this is what we haven't been able to grapple with as a society, when we speak about action and when we speak about what accountability looks like, it's often framed from the perspective of the miners who died on the 16th of August. We don't talk often enough about the days leading up to the massacre and what those did for the tone and where the accountability there is, including with the unions, including with those that were leading on the ground. And that remains a pain point for different groups in Marikana, because it's not one of those stories where there are heroes, and in many instances, people who were not supposed to become victims ended up being victims. And yet the emphasis of what responsibility looks like is often emphasized from the position of miners who we know work in very vulnerable conditions. It is a precarious industry. And those issues should be raised. But I want to confine it to what we see in Marikana.
Yes, now, Kathy, you raised quite a few things there, all of which I generally concur with, except to say that perhaps when it comes to the Farlam Commission and what its findings were, I think we're going to see that if you look at the Farlam Commission, if you then look at the Zondo Commission, and you look at what is now unfolding in the Madlanga Commission, you will see across the time a progression of how we understood the political dynamics that underpin power and how power is exercised. And I think you will see that the Farlam Commission will only address the surface of the issue. He did not go into what we are now experiencing, what we've seen in the Zondo Commission and what we're now seeing in the Madlanga Commission, the deep tentacles of how power operates and how the law is circumvented in order to achieve political outcomes and things that people want for their own interest. So that picture is emerging to South Africa now. So I think the Farlam Commission is limited in how it understood the issues and what happened as Marikana unfolded. You are absolutely correct. There was a pre-Marikana where people were dying and where workers were extremely militant. We also have a situation, and that was underpinned by the fact that those workers felt that they had nowhere to go. They felt like they were cornered in a crowd, not only on that day, but politically. They were cornered in a crowd because their union had sold them out. The union had become part of the power machinations. They were on their own. All the avenues were closed. The media themselves were continually painting them as these lawless barbarians. All of that played a role in what happened in Marikana.
And Christopher, I think it's so important that you're touching on the aspect of the unions, because when we say the unions, we're not talking about people that are not also part of the ecosystem. The union representatives are also miners. They're shop stewards in those miners, so in those mines. And I think that there are dynamics around how even themselves, how unions themselves interface with mining organizations that either contribute to what ultimately becomes the experience of the workers, whether for better or for worse. But these are the conversations that we are not having. So I guess what I'm saying is, when we position everything that happened in Marikana solely around the person of the president, it means that once, let's say the recommendation was that he were to be arrested, he would be arrested. But we would still be sitting with many of the conditions that remain. But that's because, as a society, we've not actually done the work that the Farlam Commission was pointing us to, which is that there are deeper structural issues in how mining companies are set up, in how they interact with unions, in the experience of workers, and those conditions remain today. And as long as they remain, it means that there will always be a risk of a Marikana happening again.
Well, I don't know if that's entirely true. I think it's got a lot to do with the attitude of those in power. And I think, one has got to be clear that in a different power scenario, where power is exercised differently, you might have a different outcome. In our particular case, the issue of the president and why he is central to this is that he, as the number one citizen, is a what's the word I'm looking for? He is the image. He is the entry point of understanding how power operates. The connection between big business and the state, and how when they collude, all bets are off the table. Poor and vulnerable people are at their mercy and will die if they challenge that power. And that is the reality that I think we are trying to point to, which the Farlam Commission failed to deal with, and which we are now dealing with the consequences of how our country has devolved into a mafia state of sorts, and which is now being exposed by the Matlanga Commission. So had we dealt with those issues back at the Farlam Commission, we might not be here today. The trajectory might have been different, but we didn't. And so I hope that as the Matlanga Commission prepares its reports and gives it to us, that our society will take note of this and realize that the way that we exercise power, the way that power is allowed to exercise, the fact that communities can be excluded from the decisions that directly affect them, as long as that continues, power will exercise its power with impunity. And I hope that, Marikana teaches us that lesson at the very least.
Okay. Christopher Rutledge, he is with the Mining Affected Communities United in Action Advisory Council. I believe he said it was. All right, it's 10:30. Time for your latest news headlines.
Thank you, Kathy. On the news headlines on SAfm, I am Ondela Mbana, and a very good morning. Evidence leader advocate Adila Hassim has proposed that the Matlanga Commission of Inquiry draw its findings in matter relating to Northwest businessman Suleiman Karim from the evidence it currently has. The case of the National Coloured Congress MP Fadil Adams has been transferred from Pinetown Magistrates to the Regional Court on the 11th of next month, and residents of areas in and around Melville in Johannesburg have gathered at the corner of Main and 4th Avenue to protest against ongoing water supply cuts. A full update follows at the top of the hour.
Looking for exclusive content, live events, and special broadcasts like the Matlanga Commission? Then connect to the all-new SAfm Connect stream. The Matlanga Commission, live and uninterrupted from 9:30 Monday to Friday. SAfm Connect brings you more of the conversations that matter. Listen anytime, anywhere by visiting connect.safm.co.za or stream directly on SABC Plus at sabc-plus.com. SAfm Connect. More conversations, more access. There's much more coming. For 90 years, South Africa has changed. Governments have changed. Generations have changed. Technology has changed. But through it all, one thing has remained. The conversation. From the voices of yesterday.
It's 5 o'clock on Wednesday, the 1st of March, and this is SAfm 104 to 107.
Hello. Good morning, Mr. Raphael. A very, very happy 100th birthday to you. This is Radio Station. You tell us about yourself a little bit. When you came to South Africa and what you did.
Well, I arrived in South Africa in the early days.
And the time just coming up to 7 minutes to 6 South African time, which is 3 hours 53 Greenwich Mean Time.
To the voices shaping tomorrow. This August, SAfm celebrates 90 years of conversation. A nation's story, our shared future. SAfm turns 90 from 1 August. SAfm, the conversation continues. SAfm is streaming live now on Facebook, YouTube, and X at SAfm Radio. Let's have the conversation. WhatsApp voice notes on 0614 104 107.
Good morning, I'm Tlatshane Selora Stenberg. The problem in Marikana, we will not have any accountability, McCarthy, because the politicians have interest on those mines. You are protecting such names that we can mention that we know. Our President Ramaphosa, the lake of Mr. Motsepe. Those people, they have interest on those mines. So our people won't have closure, or they won't even see justice. That's unfortunate. Bye-bye.
Gore, you know the Marikana issue, perspective, it gives credence to the third degree program. I can't remember whether it was Deborah Pata or Mabuza, Felicia Mabuza, but I think it's Deborah Pata. And then it shows us that when we complain about the history, we said white people used to write our history, will be distorted on their favor. Even the Marikana issue, the issue of the workers' perspective, they will write and amplify suffering on their side.
Yes.
The police, people who were killed prior to the Marikana shooting, will also put in that we were provoked. Now it's needed a third degree, a person who will look into the perspective through the lens, the glass that says, what happened before and after Marikana, the third degree. We need somebody who will be fair and honest. What led to this outcome?
The Daily Discourse, more than talk, real understanding.
All right, it's 10:35. You're tuned in to the Daily Discourse. Kathy Mutlatlana in for Joanne Joseph, and I'll be with you until midday. And of course, it is part of our special broadcast here at the SABC for the rest of the month. We're going to be bringing you her leadership story conversations with the CEO of the SABC, Nomsa Chabeli, alongside other powerful and dynamic women CEOs. And today we'll be featuring the CEO of SASCOC. All of that coming up at 11 o'clock, which is top of the hour. For now, though, I want us to turn our attention to this story. Women now make up almost half of Hyperion Development students, Hyperion Devs students rather, and it's up from roughly a third in 2022. However, only about 23% of women end up in South Africa's technical role. The old explanation that too few women are learning the skills is, of course, now out of the window. this is beginning to paint a whole new picture. And the question we need to ask, what is happening between qualification, the first job, and of course then the ascension or the rise to leadership positions? Our guest this morning is Dr. Anjali Ramburn, Senior Vice President, Commercial, Hyperion Dev. Good morning, Dr. Anjali. Thanks for your time.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So we are seeing that women are reaching parity in your classroom, which is great because it then deals with the notion that we don't have enough people that are skilled, we don't have enough women that are skilled or that know how to do the job. What is happening after that? Why are so many then lost on the way to employment?
Indeed, this is exactly what we have been saying. To your earlier point, 50% of our student population are now women taking cybersecurity, data science, AI, basically, and successfully completing these courses. The issue is not about landing their first job anymore. What we are saying is retention progression is where the drop-off is. This is where we should really focus on. Once a woman has landed their first tech job, do we have the right support within the organization to get them through the different layers, to get them to their next phase of their career?
So what kind of an industry is the tech industry? Because perhaps the answer in and of itself might be found in trying to understand the ecosystem. So what is it really that women are signing up for when they choose a career in tech?
Yeah, well, the thing is, it has been a male-dominated sector, right? Like if you think about any big tech companies and look at their boards, look at their leadership level, how many women are you going to see in that room? Very few, most likely, maybe one, maybe two. That's really where the issue is. Because when you are signing up to move into tech, you are really signing up to fight the system, to find your voice, to find other sponsors that can really get you a seat at the table. So it is intimidating, it is daunting, but it's not impossible.
So you're signing up to fight the system, and we know that this is the experience of many women in male-dominated sectors, right? That they're having to sit there and think about the trade-offs. Now, on the one hand, of course, there are decisions that individuals are making in line with what they want for themselves. But on the other, there's, of course, then what work is also needed to do to push the boundaries of industries, right? And as I say this, I'm reminded of the legal fraternity, which was so male-dominated that for a very long time, they didn't even have a policy on sexual harassment and how to deal with sexual harassment in the workplace or just in the sector. And, you know, that sort of came to the fore in some of the JC interviews 2 years back. And so in as much as an industry can be quite ahead, it can also be behind in ensuring that the rights of all who are participating in that industry are actually accounted for. So what does that look like in the technology industry? What needs to change in order to make the trade-off for women not be choosing whether or not I can have a family, whether or not I can raise a family? There are many other trade-offs, I'm sure, that professionals in your sector would be able to add to that. But what are those trade-offs?
Yeah, well, we can start. There are many, obviously, but let's start with the workplace culture. The environment, the organizational design needs to shift in itself. When we are thinking of more and more women entering tech industries, we also need to be able to support them throughout. They are coming in with all kinds of responsibilities, caregiving being one of them, whether it's for their kids, whether it's for their parents. They're studying, there's a career, there's other responsibilities. So, I mean, there is a bit of support that is required to just get them to stay and move forward. That's one. Second, we can look at really creating leadership opportunities from the word get-go. Having a proper onboarding plan, having a sort of career projection, where can you be in 1 year, where can you be in 2 years, and actually assessing 1 year later, 2 years later, is this happening? If it's not happening, why is it not happening, and what is it that we need to change? Then there's the gender pay gap, right? Why we are seeing that this is better than what it used to be. There is still the gender pay gaps. I mean, this is also something that in the workforce, we need to address.
What kind of working hours are those who are in the sector really exposed to? What are the expectations on women in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, our number of hours and where we are today has obviously changed post-COVID. The remote working is very much a reality, while we see many companies continuing to adopt remote working, flexible working hours. There has also been a shift where big organizations, big tech organizations are reverting and going back to the 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 kind of landscape. This is an issue, right? You have to be able to trust your workforce. You have to be able to trust that they will be productive when it's remote, when it's not like be at the office from 9 to 5. Having talked to different women who actually have to be at the office from 9 to 5, you see that a real problem.
Often we know that the best time to negotiate, especially for conditions, is right before employment, right? When the employer is still after you more than you are after them once you are in the system. So what is it that you would say women should be asking before accepting jobs in the industry, so that they don't end up with the frustrations that they do that ultimately drive them out? Because we know it's very difficult to change systems, to change culture once you are inside.
Yeah, indeed. Having a transparent conversation from the very beginning is so important. And for those who have done that, you actually see it working out in some way. So just like being very open about the commitments that one has during the day, whether it is picking up your kids at 3 p.m. every day, there needs to be some sort of arrangement, right? Productivity does go down. You find other ways to get the job done, and that is maybe after hours, once all the kids are in bed, having that focus time. So being transparent, being open about your needs is very important from the get-go.
All right, Dr. Anjali Rayburn, Senior Vice President Commercial at Hyperion Dev. Are you a woman in tech, right? And you remember the movie Hidden Figures. If that is just a depiction of what happens and what is likely still happening in tech industries, one truly can understand why so many women are being lost along the way. Because the working hours are just so long. The culture in and of itself is often so difficult for women. Why? Because it's been built around the men. It's been shaped around the men. Are you a woman in tech? What is your experience? And perhaps you've had a completely different experience. Please share that with us. What did you do that led to you staying in the industry and perhaps even climbing, to the different heights that the sector offers? The numbers to use this morning, of course, would always appreciate you using the studio line. That's 086 000 2032. That's 086 000 2032. On the WhatsApp voice note line, 0614 104 107. That's 0614 104 107.
Voices may have changed, times may have changed, but the conversation continues. SAfm 90 years.
My name is Dr. Sibongiseni Dlomo, wishing you SAFM many more years of good conversations. Congratulations on the 90 years of broadcasting, accommodating all of us in the country and in the world.
Wow, SAFM, a whole 90 years. Well done. In many ways, you mirror us as South Africans, SAFM. We're very proud of you. And this milestone must be celebrated. And as I said, we're very proud of you because you reflect us. This is Donovan E. Williams.
90 years of questions. 90 years of answers. 90 years of South Africans speaking to South Africa. Before there was the SAfm you know today, there was the English service, there was Radio South Africa, Radio South Africa, and there was a country going through extraordinary change.
Hello. Good morning, Mr. Raphael.
From the darkness of apartheid.
I have to inform honourable members.
Through the states of emergency.
Earlier, it was reported an explosion had occurred at an ESCOM.
Through the release of Nelson Mandela.
Comrades and fellow South Africans, I greet you all.
Through the birth of a democratic South Africa.
As we know, elections do not create change, they create only the opportunity for change.
The conversations continued, and in 1995, a new SAfm emerged. A new country, a new voice, a new chapter. This August, SAfm looks back at the journey that brought us here. The voices, the moments, the people, the history. 90 years of conversation, a nation story, our shared future. SAfm turns 90 from 1 August. SAfm, the conversation continues. The Daily Discourse, more than talk, real understanding.
All right, it's 10:50, so just 10 minutes to go before the top of the hour. Kathy Motlatlana in for Joanne Joseph on the Daily Discourse this morning. We're going to turn to the story now. Nearly half of South Africa's wastewater systems are now rated critical, and almost half the water entering municipal systems is not generating revenue. Much of it is lost through leaks and failing infrastructure. The Human Rights Commission says this is no longer a series of local breakdowns. It is a national crisis requiring a disaster declaration. Joining us for more on the story is Dr. Henk Boshoff, Commissioner, the South African Human Rights Commission. Dr. Boshoff, good morning to you. Thanks for your time.
Good morning, Kathy. Thanks for having me.
We've long been tracking the state of collapse in municipalities. Water provision, unfortunately, is a major one. Residents often bringing it up through what we've now come to see as the water tankering systems. We now have a whole economy that has developed around failed infrastructure and failed water delivery by municipalities, again, by way of this water tankering, a system that is brought in. Is what the Human Rights Commission saying that the problem is so wide scale that when we take the macro view, all we see is that we now are at a state where the majority of South Africa is unable to access clean, potable water, and that's why you're calling it a national disaster, that it's so far beyond any singular municipality, any singular metro, that the collective experiences of South Africans is now one where there is difficulty with access to water delivery.
Kathy, you've articulated it better than I can. Firstly, allow me just to provide you with some context and background. It was the position of the South African Human Rights Commission earlier this year that the water crisis should be declared a national disaster. Remember, you guys residing in Gauteng experienced serious water challenges. I mean, many suburbs, many communities did not have access to water for days, weeks, even months. We conducted an inquiry into water in the Gauteng province about 3 months ago, and there were communities residing in the southern parts of Johannesburg informing us that they've not had access to water for more than 2 years. This was testimony under oath. They've not had access to water for more than 2 years. Informal settlements in the southern parts of Johannesburg. Now, we then, in February this year, decided as the Commission to pen a letter to the chairperson of the National Disaster Management Centre recommending that the water crisis should be declared a national disaster. And we based it on empirical research, we based it on inquiries that we conducted in 6 provinces, and also an investigative report that we issued in the Northwest province. So 7 provinces. We based our view, our input, and our recommendation that the water crisis should be declared a national disaster on our inquiries and investigations, etc. Now, we were then immediately in February given the opportunity to present our motivation to a special heads meeting of the National Disaster Management Centre. 2 days later, the President delivered his State of the Nation address, and he also announced measures to deal with the water crisis, and the National Water Committee was established. And as you know, the National Water Action Plan was recently issued. Now, on Wednesday, we hosted a webinar again on the water crisis. We invited high-profile stakeholders to also present, to act as speakers, and we had an audience, attendees of academics, government officials, etc., attending the webinar. Now, the question that I put to our attendees was, is the outcomes, or are the outcomes contained in the Water Action Plan sufficient to address the immediate challenge? You know, when we went to the Northern Cape, there were communities telling us that they've not had access to water for more than 6 months. When we went to Northwest, communities told us, especially in the tribal authorities, that they've not had access to water for more than a year. Gauteng, I've referred to what we received as testimony. Communities saying they've not had access to water for 2 years. Now, I put it to the attendees. Is what is contained in the Water Action Plan as the way forward sufficient in addressing the immediate challenge? People don't want water, 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now. They need water now. Water, in terms of Section 27 of the South African Constitution, is a fundamental human right. Everyone is entitled to sufficient water. And I think one of the outcomes of the webinar was that more should be done, more measures should be identified by the National Water Committee to address the immediate challenge. We simply cannot allow communities to suffer and not to have immediate access to sufficient water.
Yeah. Henk, how do we bring in accountability here? Because that seems to be a big missing piece of the puzzle that we sit with. Certainly, when we look at the budgets of municipalities, the amounts of money that is being spent to procure for water, that sits very high. And often it's done under deviation because it is a crisis. And the very same reasons that you've spoken about are the same reasons that are used to have these funds released. The problem is it doesn't go where it's supposed to. It doesn't do what it's supposed to do. So how do we begin to bring accountability into the system and ensure that municipalities don't continue to do this and get away with it?
Well, local government, we must be honest, local government in South Africa has failed. Local government has failed to address the service delivery needs of ordinary citizens. You know, the very first section in the Constitution, Section 1, states that the South African democracy is founded on specific values. Those values are human dignity, the achievement of equality, and the advancement of human rights. Now, rather than living lives of dignity, tens of millions of South Africans are still living lives of indignity. And, you know, it was the intention when the drafters of the Constitution drafted the responsibilities of local government. It was the intention that through the mechanism of providing services to communities, local government would ensure human dignity for all, and we would also achieve equality for everyone. However, local government has failed. We must be honest. Local government in South Africa has failed. You can go to many provinces, dysfunctional municipalities in the Free State province, all of them. All the municipalities in the Northwest province. The majority, if not all, the municipalities in the Northern Cape. Many dysfunctional municipalities in Gauteng. And because these municipalities have failed, we have not adhered to those values in the Constitution. We have not achieved human dignity for all, equality for all in South Africa. And you were asking the question about accountability. These municipalities, their political leaderships, their administrative leaderships should be held accountable. They should be held accountable because they have failed the people of South Africa.
How does the Human Rights Commission ensure that accountability happens? Because again, you know, you're making this call, but it's going to be just yet another press release, yet another statement from the Human Rights Commission. Who's listening in government? Who is listening in Parliament that is actually going to give meaning to this call that you're making?
Well, you know, because we are a Chapter 9 institution, and all the government departments and all the legislatures and parliament really take the work of the Commission seriously. We've been given the opportunity to present in many portfolio committees of all the legislatures in the country, the provincial legislatures. We also have a cordial relationship with the Water and Sanitation Portfolio Committee in the National Assembly, also the Cooperative Governance Portfolio Committee in the National Assembly. But we have a very, very good relationship with the Select Committee for Cooperative Governance in the National Council of Provinces. We have made many presentations to these structures. We have also had meetings with the relevant national cabinet ministers. So on a regular basis, we are given the opportunity to present our views, to identify the challenges, to present our reports based on sworn testimonies of ordinary citizens, government departments, municipalities. And it's very important that when government, especially the National Water Committee, meet, that they also invite the Commission, because we have valuable research information, valuable output available on our website that we can present to all these committees and structures.
Dr. Henk, we're going to have to leave it there. It's time for your latest news update. And don't forget, now's the time to turn up the dial for our special conversation coming up in the final hour of the show. I saw you did say that there was a song that was going to be played. Okay.
Thank you, Kathy. On the top stories, the Malanga Commission will lay criminal charges against Karim and Melville residents protest against water supply cuts. For SAfm News, I'm Ondelambana, and a very good morning. The Malanga Commission says it will lay a criminal charge against Northwest businessman Suleiman Karim. Karim was scheduled to appear before the Commission in Pretoria this morning, but failed to do so. The Commission has been considering his medical condition and his failure to comply with conditions relating to his appearance. The Commission's chairperson,
I don't know, you can ask the team.
If the Commission were not to do that, it would itself not be taking its processes seriously.
Okay. So must I keep these ones? Okay. I'll keep these ones then. Hello, how are you? How are you, Nomsa? I'm about to move out of this chair, so just give me a second. I'm going to sit in that corner.
And we cannot and we will not have that. So the Commission.
Sorry, I'm going to sit on that end. I just need to move my stuff out of
Karim.
The case of the National Coloured Congress MP Fadil Adams has been transferred from Pinetown Magistrates Court to the Regional Court on the 11th of next month. These charges are in connection with the visits to detainees in Durban's Westville prison when their cases were before court. Both detainees have since been convicted. Adams was arrested in May and granted bail of 10,000 rand. The case was postponed to today for further investigation. At least 15 boats in the Val Dam have been secured. This after severe thunderstorms and strong winds damaged jetties and left several vessels drifting at Manton Marina. The 2 yachts sank at their moorings, while rescue teams from the National Sea Rescue Institute, Val Dam, Witbank and Gauteng joined marina staff and boat owners to secure the affected vessels. The Institute spokesperson Craig Lambinon.
On Thursday, Innisfree Baldam, Innisfree Witbank, Innisfree Gauteng, Manton Marina staff and local boat owners made best use of the clearing weather conditions to corral and move boats around in the harbour, securing the vessels. Using the 2 Innisfree rescue craft, 4 of the sailing vessels were escorted and guided to the Gauteng side of the Val Dam, and they were safely secured at marinas. Some jetties that had broken free were secured. The Innisfree crew, Manton Marina staff and local boat owners worked tirelessly throughout Thursday to bring some order to securing vessels in the marina.
Residents of areas in and around Melville in Johannesburg have gathered at the corner of Main and 4th Avenue to protest against ongoing water supply cuts. They are demanding urgent action from the City of Johannesburg and Rand Water. The residents say some communities have gone for months without reliable water supply. Following a similar crisis just 6 months ago. One of the residents, Josh Nell, asked for greater accountability on the part of the relevant authorities.
They call it communications, but it's anything but. It's woefully inadequate.
So when they
might get a WhatsApp on their official channel with just reservoir levels, but nothing about what's being done, what's behind the problems, what they're doing to resolve them. We struggle to get any clear answers out of representatives, and when we do, it's the straightforward, like PR speak, use 1,000 words to say we have no idea what's going on. And that's, I think, exacerbating the anger that we're seeing on the ground, and also making it incredibly hard for us to believe that anything is going to change.
The Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has regained his parliamentary seat in a by-election in Clacton in eastern England. He easily beat his main challenger, Count Binfes, a comedian dressed as a rubbish bin. Farage triggered the vote last month to strengthen his position in response to an investigation into his finances. Other major parties boycotted the election. The BBC's Harry Farley has the details.
Nigel Farage has won a resounding victory. He won more votes today than he did at the general election 2 years ago. There were fewer votes cast today than that election 2 years ago, and yet he won more. And Reform UK will argue that that vindicates their decision to call this election and sends a message to that parliamentary investigation that's ongoing into his finances, to say that this seat strongly backs Nigel Farage.
Recapping the top story, the Madlanga Commission says it will lay a criminal charge against Northwest businessman Suleiman Karim. Karim was scheduled to appear before the Commission in Pretoria this morning but failed to do so. I'm Ondilambana for SAfm News Headlines at 11:30.
Moving to a bigger office space can be expensive. Thanks to My Way Business Insurance, I get to save up to 20% on my insurance premiums every month. Plus, I get My Business Assist, which helps me with marketing, legal, and admin services. Saving money while growing my business is a great win for me.
Switch to My Way Business Insurance and save up to 20% on your monthly premiums. Real businesses, real savings. Call us on 0860 646464 today for a quote. My Way is a licensed non-life insurer and FSP. Standard rates and T's and C's apply.
Durban, the promenade is calling and the purple wave is taking over the East Coast. It's time to lace up for the Hollywood Beds Durban 10-kilometer road race on Sunday, 30 August. The race covers the beautiful tour of the city, combining urban streets, scenic coastal roads, and stunning beachfront stretches with views of the Indian Ocean. Catch all the action live on SABC2 and SABC Plus from 7 a.m. on Sunday, 30th of August. The Hollywood Beds Durban 10-kilometer road race, brought to you by SABC Sports.
Pedestrians crossing the road in winter can be deadly, especially on highways. These are no walking zones for a reason. Always use pedestrian bridges and designated crossings, even if it takes a little longer. No shortcut is worth your life. Stay smart, stay patient, and always cross where it's safe. This message is brought to you by the National Department of Transport. SAfm is streaming live now on Facebook, YouTube, and X at SAfm Radio. The Daily Discourse on SAfm, weekday mornings from 9 to 12.
You know that she is absolutely one of our favorites here at SAfm, Nomfundo Xaluva. We've had her on during different times over a period of 4 years, and she really is one of those musicians that we know our listeners absolutely love. So I'm quite excited to know today that the origins of this great musician of this country is actually sitting across from me now. And it is 11 after 11 o'clock. You're listening to the Daily Discourse. Joanne Joseph out for the day, Kathy Mutlatlana in. And we continue our coverage for Women's Month. And we're looking at her Leadership Conversations series in collaboration and, of course, led really by the group CEO of the SABC, Nomsa Chabeli. Last week it was her turn in the hot seat, and this time, you're going to need to know what it feels like to turn the heat up on others. Nomsa, good morning. Again, a pleasure to have you in the seat, and I want us to start off with why it is so important for these conversations to be happening in the first place, because this is something that you feel very strongly about.
Good morning, Kathy, and good morning, Nozipho. Thank you so much for joining us today. Kathy, these conversations are important not just for Women's Month. They're important because as women, we've really had to strive very hard to break this ceiling and be heard. And I think what's important is that it's not just being heard, but it's the issue of now that we've got the seat at the table, what are we doing with it to ensure that we leave a legacy for the young people who come after us. But it's also to explore with different women the journey that they've walked and what the learnings for all of us and the similarities and how do we actually lift each other up. And that's what this is all about.
And the guest for today is Nozipho Jafta. She is the CEO of SASCOC. She also happens to be Nomfundo Xaluva's mother. So she was jamming along as that song came on. You can imagine how many times she's heard it, even before we, as the rest of the country, had a chance to listen to it. Nomsa, you spoke about how much you love sport. So we're not surprised that this is the first interview that we're doing. We've seen South African women keep producing world-class performances globally. Often it's happening with little money, fewer coverage, and fewer leadership opportunities for men in the industry. And these are just some of the things that you want to explore as we mark and we celebrate 70 years of the Women's March.
I think that's what's important, what we want to discuss here today. Okay. I think we've got Nozipho, who's leading SASCOC, which is a very critical institution in this country. She leads an institution that is really responsible for carrying the dreams of so many athletes who spend literally their lives training probably for that one moment where they appear, whether it's the Olympics, whether it's the Commonwealth Games or any other sporting activity. And I think what's important here is that we know the pressures in which these institutions are led under, to your point, Kathy. With little investment, we literally have to find ways to ensure that the sustainability is there, to ensure that we leave these institutions in a better manner than we found them. And I think for me, what's exciting about this discussion today is just to talk with Nozipho through her journey leading SASCOC. For me, I think there's a similarity because this is also a public institution, just like the SABC, and we all know the pressures in which the SABC finds itself in a highly disrupted world. And I think, you sit here obviously carrying the dreams of athletes. And what I'd like to know from you, Nozipho, is from where you sit, I think tell us about, there's Nozipho, the CEO, who walked into this building and walked into this studio today. But what we want to find about is Nozipho beyond the title as well. And I think just as a starter, let us know about who is Nozipho.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Thank you, Nomsa, for the invitation. You started by playing my daughter's song, and I think what that did, I used to cry a lot when she performs, and I think it brought back those emotions. I feel like, I want to cry again, I just want to cry because she just makes us so proud. And I know she's been interviewed by Kathy before, and she's everything to us. I'm even a granny, by the way, so ndingu granny kazizi. I'm a granny, I'm an aunt, I am a sister, I'm a golfer. I just love life. You know, I always say that these titles are very temporal. You know, I'm a CEO today, but I'm still Nozipho. And in the world of sports, maybe there are a lot of people who don't even know my name because we get called by our titles. Somebody will come in here and say, hello, CEO. And in the room, there's 10 of us who are CEOs. So I am Nozipho. I lead this organization called SASCOC. And what I've realized leading SASCOC is that I'm actually stronger than I thought. You know, it's a very complex environment. You know, sports can be political. Sports can be very emotional. I mean, if your daughter can swim in your swimming pool and she's not selected to go and represent South Africa, we'll get an email that says, my daughter is such a good swimmer, you know. So we get to deal with such things. But other than that, I just love life. I just love good conversations, and I'm happy to be here. And, yeah.
I think looking at just SASCOC and just the role it plays in our society, tell us and our listeners in terms of what does the CEO of SASCOC really carry? What is it like in terms of just the leading that institution? You not just lead it from a South African perspective, but it's a global body that engages with, let's say, the Olympic body itself and really prepares South Africa when it comes to anything related to the Olympics. And what is your role there?
So it's a very unique organization if you look at other countries. So SASCOC, we do Olympics, yes. We do World Games. We've just come back from the Commonwealth Games. We do African Games. So we're one body that is affiliated to all these organizations. So we don't just do Olympics. As a CEO, it's a very interesting one. It's the biggest job, and it's the most amazing job that I have, to lead that organization. We've got 78 sporting codes that are our members. So I know in South Africa, people don't know that there's something called Pigeon code, you know. Amawabe, they do race, you know. We've got ship shearing, it's one of our codes. We've got rugby, cricket, and I know everyone knows the big ones, but we've got all these sporting codes that are our members. We're also responsible for the governance of sports in the country. So every year we have to do this audit of all our federations to check if they're still compliant with SARS, they're compliant, they submit their AFs, they submit their minutes that they've had, AGMs, and it's a huge responsibility. And we always try at SASCOC to be at the back of the newspapers. You know, that's where sports belong. We don't want to be in the front pages for all the wrong reasons. So as my responsibility in that front is to make sure that we keep clean as an organization. And if you have followed SASCOC for over, 5 years ago, 6, 7 years ago, we were in the papers for all the wrong reasons. You know, and when I joined SASCOC, I had to make sure that we rebuild that stakeholder confidence. You know, the first year I joined, we were able to bring in a big sponsor, you know, to the tune of 66 million. To me, that was a vote of confidence. But at the same time, you know, we had to relook at the whole brand. I mean, when I was talking to you earlier on, we were talking about branding. You know, and I know you spoke about branding in your interview last time. To me, that is very important, to rebuild this trust, because people need to trust us as an organization. I had to look at the staff morale. It was very low. And I had to look at the whole governance structure of SASCOC because, you know, we were in the papers for all the wrong reasons, and most of those reasons were related to governance and accounting for the money that we receive. I can now safely say that we are in the good space. We've just gone through a stabilization phase. We've just to make sure that we stabilize the organization. Now we are at the phase where we're talking about growing the organization, bringing more partners. And as a CEO of SASCOC, that is my responsibility. And we always say that you want to keep the athletes at the center of everything that we do. So whatever we do, we need to know that it's our athletes who are important.
Now, you know, listening to you, you're talking about how you've had to really rebuild the trust and ensure that you build the resilience of the organization, looking at the governance side of it. However, let's let's go back in terms of where did your leadership instinct come from? Because that's so much required in rebuilding that trust and getting people to buy into your vision and journey with you for that vision. And where did that instinct come from? Who were the influencers of Nozipho as you were growing up, who made you, who influenced you to become who you are today?
I'm a firstborn, firstly. So being a firstborn, you are like a deputy parent. You know, you lead without knowing that you are leading. I've brought up all my sister's kids. I just lead my family. That's where it all started. The love of sport, it started a long time ago. And people don't believe that I actually have Eastern Cape, Eastern Province, it used to be called Eastern Province colors. I used to run. I was an athlete. I know Nada is looking at me thinking, I've never seen you. But I am actually an athlete. I used to belong to a club called the Golden Eagles in Port Elizabeth, which is now called Gqeberha. The leadership, you know, I remember when I started working, I was in Cape Town, very young at the time. And those days, you know, when being in Cape Town 30 years ago, we were like, hey, the ceiling is too low here. I need to leave Cape Town. I need to start looking at growing. I need to start looking at building my career. And I left Cape Town and I came to Joburg. And I've been through a lot as a leader. I've worked for very exciting organizations. I've worked for very challenging organizations. But, you know, as a leader, you had to maneuver and get yourself, you know, and see how you maneuver out of those situations. But I've always wanted to be a leader. I've watched people. I've got a very good friend of mine. She's my bestie, Kathy. I know you've interviewed her again, Nolita Fakude. Yes. Nolita, we went to school together. She's one of the people that I look at and I think she just leads with humility. Nolita is just, you know, I always marvel when I look at Nolita, and she's one of the people that I really, really follow. She's one of the people that I really honor every time I get an opportunity. And I also belong to this group of women, very strong women. You know, we meet once a month, and we just talk about leadership. We just talk about everything, you know. And they're such a strong group of women, and I look up to them. So I grew up having all these role models, you know. And if I look at the politicians and I look at Mama Winnie, you know, and what she had to go through, and I've just watched her, the Netflix documentary that's focusing on her, and I see myself thinking, this is the kind of leader that I love, because we have to take tough decisions. You know, sometimes you don't have to be very popular with the decisions that you take. So that's the kind of, you know, upbringing and just looking at the role models around me and the people that I really honor. My mother, you know, she was such a leader of our family, you know, and that's where this all comes from.
You know, Nozipho, you bring out something so important, especially in an age where, you know, there's, of course, access to so much education and skills available at a wholesale. But leadership begins before even one can acquire skills in a formal way. And Nomsa, you also alluded to this in your own story last week. And these are the things that perhaps we don't see or even take seriously about ourselves. Being a deputy mom, in many ways, is exposing you to systems of power within the household, how to navigate those systems, how to challenge them. And what would you say to young women today who don't necessarily see themselves as leaders, but they are deputy moms? They are the people that are at the center point of their families, of their communities, and are already leading. But yet when that comes as a formal proposition, they think, no, but I'm not ready. It's just that this leadership is not my thing.
Yeah, because it goes back to how they define leadership. You know, we all think that leadership is the title. You know, if you don't have the title, you don't think you are a leader. Whereas I did not have a title when I was a deputy mom. I was just leading. So we've got a lot of those young people who are at that stage, who are going through the same, but who don't really know that they're leading their families. That, you know, and I guess what I would say to them is they need to start recognizing that they are a leader, because that's what you build on. You know, that's what you build on, and to get to where we are now, Nomsa, as CEOs, it did not start here. You know, it's you know, building up from that young girl, you know, who was leading a family, and to what it is now, and to who we are now as the leaders of our organizations.
You know, just listening to you, I realize that one of the key things, particularly in the society in which we exist, is that many a household are headed by women. And many a household, then the deputy CEO becomes the young lady in the house, having had to take responsibility from the mom and really having to carry a very heavy load, which also takes us back to that day in, 70 years ago, when those women, 20,000 of them, decided to march and to demand dignity for South African women. And one of the key things that we keep on talking about is that statement, which really spoke as well to the resilience that women are expected to bring to their everyday lives. You know, we don't complain, we accept what's been dealt to us, and we just make it work. And therefore, we tend to celebrate women for being resilient. But we have to sometimes ask women to be resilient in the face of everything else, where we don't really recognize their vulnerability and the fact that there is more to it than this super strength that we asked of them. How have you actually managed that in your life, where you are expected to show up for everyone, when at the same time you need to take care of Nozipho?
Yeah, I think it gets to a point where you also tell yourself that it's actually okay not to be a superwoman. You know, you can cry. You know, you can be emotional. You can be a woman, you know. And I think it takes a lot of experience to actually recognize that, because we tend to carry this load. We tend to think that this load belongs to us. We tend to think that that's what is expected of us. And once you've realized that that is actually not the case, or should not be the case, then you are able to say, but it's okay not to be a superwoman. You know, I mean, I don't have to be a superwoman. And as I said, it really just takes a lot of beating, a lot of experience, and a lot of going through certain things to realize that actually, that's fine. I can be a Nozipho anytime when I want to be.
And looking at our journeys, I mean, the three of us sitting here, what we've had to endure to actually sit where we're sitting. From your perspective, Nozipho, what is it that young women going forward shouldn't have to endure, that we've had to actually deal with in our day-to-day lives just to be heard? And sitting here, having that rear view mirror, what is it that they shouldn't have to endure?
I think young people must be true to themselves. You know, because once you start enduring things that you know are not necessarily yours, you're not true to yourself. I think we need to start educating our kids that they have to be true to themselves. Because when you are true to yourself, then you can go through all these things that we're talking about. I think for me, it goes back to just being true to yourself and just being who you are. Realize what you can and what you can't do, instead of trying to please everyone, trying to endure things that are not necessarily yours. I think for me, it just goes back to being true to yourself.
And the power of building a community. So if we're to speak about lessons that draw from the generation of the 70s, these were just ordinary women who worked with what they had available to them. And what they had available to them was not by any stretch of the imagination comparable to what women today have available to us. The building of a community, and I know that this is something that also Sis Nolita is also really passionate about. And in fact, she's quite critical of the younger generation, that we seem to have an inability to build community amongst ourselves, that we think that we can do it. We know we've got this, I can do it, I can conquer these things by myself, but that's not how generations of women have done it. What are we missing in those lessons of the unity of struggle, the solidarity, if nothing else, that has existed amongst generations of women, that has helped them to cross boundaries that perhaps we are not doing today, and people are suffering in silence. We're seeing high depression rates. We're seeing high rates of people that are struggling with mental illness. But
all because they're having to carry the load and feel like they have to carry the load alone.
And we tend to be very scared of opening up, you know. And the reason why some people go through the depression and everything else that they go through is because you're scared to share your vulnerabilities with the next person. And you tend to just, you know, bottle up and bottle up and bottle up. And at the end of the day, these things, you know, how they affect you mentally. I think when we build communities, it also starts by creating platforms where we begin to share. You know, let's begin to share our experiences. Let's begin to share our traumas, you know, because then you are relieving yourself of that kind of stress that you're referring to. And in my opinion, we need to start opening up and start engaging with each other and even teach our children to do the same. Because, I mean, I look at the cases that we read about where, you know, people commit suicide, and it's because they were bottling up stuff. And I think for me, once we begin to share and create those platforms where we do that sharing, I think it will be better managed.
Is part of the challenge also, Nozipho, not you are both CEOs. When you begin to be vulnerable and when you have to share, that is seen as an antithesis to what you. Yes, you're being weak. It's there go the women again, crying all day, complaining all day, and when you're in a position of leadership, you're expected to have that straight face, to have it together all the time. How do you contend with that when the crux of the issues you're facing are actually in your position?
Nomsa.
You know, my experience is one is to lead with authenticity, because I can tell you, trying to lead with perfection is tiring. It's really a tiring exercise, and you lose a sight of who you are. And with authenticity, then you are able to build community. You are able to engage with other people who are also walking their own journeys, but there's always a similarity in who we are as human beings. You know, we don't realize that we have so much more in common that we have differences, you know, because these themes come through. So for me, it's one of the key things that we've had to look at. And I think that's one of the things that I think the younger generation actually struggles with, having to live in a world of social media, of this digital presence where you've got to present yourself in a certain way, and how the people are looking at you and they're thinking, I also want to be like that, when you yourself are not actually presenting your true self. And I think that's really the challenge that we are living with now, in a world where it doesn't really encourage you to claim yourself and be true to yourself, accept your vulnerabilities, and actually not be scared of admitting those vulnerabilities and appearing in front of other people and saying, actually, I'm struggling here. Because these journeys can be very lonely. And what's important is for us to build that sense of community where we are not lonely, where we are journeying with other people who are also struggling to find themselves. And so for me, that sense of authenticity has been so critical in terms of this is who I am, and you have to deal with the person that's standing in front of you. I'm not saying I'm perfect, and we'll learn from each other, but at least we know what we each stand for. And that for me has been so critical in helping me build that community of people who say, we know what to expect from Nomsa, you know, and we know now, if I looked at her this morning, she wasn't looking so good. I'm going to give her a call to find out what's going on. And that's what this should be about as leaders, particularly as women, because we know we often walk into rooms. If I look at your role, sport is known for being very masculine. You know, that's the reality of sport. And having to walk in there as a woman and having to hold the room and what it means for you.
I think you touched on something that I wanted to say, that we're not perfect. You know, that's the reality. We're not perfect. And if you're not true to yourself, I mean, I remember just recently, I was in a meeting just before we went to Glasgow. I was in a meeting and I get a call from my sister crying that one of our sisters, younger cousins, passed away. And I'm sitting in this meeting. She says, I got a call from her baby telling us that my mom is not waking up, my mom is cold. I'm like, oh, okay, that's fine. I'll deal with it later. And so you were saying, then I realized that, no, man, what's going on? I want to cry. You know, I've just lost someone in my family, but I wanted to be this strong leader. To be, okay, I need to finish this meeting. I need to make sure that everything is in place before I leave. You know, that's exactly what you're saying, that I so wanted to be perfect in that meeting, to be this boss, and I've just lost someone very close to us, you know. Yeah, that's the kind of environment that we find ourselves in, and the expectations are so high in our positions as CEOs, and sometimes they are very unrealistic. But we have to soldier on. I mean, we're leading people. We've been entrusted with resources. We've been entrusted with this huge responsibility, and unfortunately, we're not perfect. So we have to show some vulnerability from time to time. I think for me, that's what makes a good leader.
I think just looking, you know, just following up on what you're saying, one of the key things that we are tasked with and we look at it is the issue of personal success versus a legacy. So a lot of the time, we are judged on what we achieve as individuals, when in fact, it's bigger than that. For quite a lot of us, it's not just about being individually successful. If you look at it, throughout my career, I've become increasingly convinced that leadership cannot be measured by us occupying positions, and that it's about what remains after we vacate those positions, particularly when we work in the environments in which we work in, and that it's not enough for us to have succeeded in these systems that we found, which have been dominated by genuinely males and what society expects. And these systems were not designed for us, if we think about it. Women often find themselves having to choose between a career and having a home. And based on your experience, what do you believe that you are changing, for example, within SASCOC, that you hope that many other women would not have to fight for? Particularly because you're in this environment, think about the athletes that are fighting to really have a presence. I look at sport because as SABC, we work in that environment. You look at the funding of sport, you find that the most funded tends to be the male sports. That's where the sponsorship lies. That's where it's believed the audiences lie. And you find that, therefore, if you look at the women's side, it's underfunded, and women literally have to have 3 jobs just to be able to show up from the starting line. And being there, being the woman who's now carrying this torch, how have you found that you've had to navigate and to change this environment so that more women are able to come through, particularly as professionals in sport?
Yeah, so if I look at my environment, I mean, I said earlier on that we've got 78 presidents. So that's the only time we've got 10 presidents in one room or 50 presidents in one room. And less than 15 are women. So that's challenge number 1 from a leadership point of view. And then if you look at the funding, as you've rightly mentioned, that when you look at funding of sports, women's sports, there's still a lot of work to be done. If you look at even the media coverage of women's sports, that's also quite low, you know. I know the department about 2 years ago started to put together a policy of women in sports, and it was trying to address some of those challenges that we're facing as women. In my environment, we even have it in our constitution that our board has to be made up of 50% women, 50% men. It's a constitution. So we encourage our federations to do the same, because we have to be intentional about these things. You know, if we talk about them in passing, nothing is going to change. So we have to be intentional. When we interrogate the federations and we look at the elections and all those things that go with it, we do ask those tough questions. Where are the women? I mean, look at when you go to soccer, you look at the people that are on stage, you'll see it's all men, you know. So it's a fight that we continue to fight. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to make sure that women are considered for these positions, but also women do occupy these positions. We can't be learners forever, you know. We're always in training. Women, you have to be a deputy, what, forever. Because I always say, you're not ready. Who told you that we're not ready? Women are ready. We need to take up these positions. But just to go back to what you were saying earlier on, Nomsa, about success, there's a saying that I love so much where they talk about the difference between being successful and being great. What do you want to be remembered for? Do you want to be remembered as a successful CEO or a great CEO? Because for me, greatness goes beyond your time at SABC. When you're not here, people must still remember you see. So to me, that's a great leader. And I loved it when it was explained to me, and it was in church, by the way. It was one of the sermons that was done, to say, what do you want to be remembered for? Are you a great leader, or are you just a successful leader because you've delivered Team South Africa to the Olympics? But when I'm not there, I want my people in the sporting sector to remember me for the kind of work that I've done when I was occupying that position. And also, I just want to make sure that the women who are coming after me, they find that door wider than it was when I joined SASCOC.
The imperative of what leaders do and the institution that they leave behind, the legacy they leave behind, that has a direct translation in the lives of young women who are sitting somewhere in the Eastern Cape where you come from, somewhere in Soweto, Nomsa, where you come from, or in Limpopo, where I come from. Talk to us about how you are working to intentionally change the experience of athletes, and in particular female athletes, because that becomes one of the measurable ways, right? Where, it's Women's Month, so I know all of us are going to find ourselves in many conversations that talk about how women are championing each other, and yes, we're doing this, we're doing that, but often it's the question one gets asked is, but where are your case studies, right? Show us the people that you've actually opened doors for. Show us the people that you can actually say, this and this happened because I was there at this particular time. And without me, without me making 1, 2, 3 decisions, it would not have been possible, because that's the kind of accountability that women are seeking out, especially from women in leadership like yourselves. And I know sometimes it feels a little bit unfair because you're also having to deal with your own issues that comes with leading the organizations.
True. So, when I talk about being intentional, that's where it starts. You have to be intentional about it. And being intentional, I think in my space, even when we look at teams that we're going to deliver to the games, we say, give me the demographics. I want to see how many women are here. When we look at our funding, we do have some money that we put aside to invest in our athletes. We look at, do we have women that we can invest in, because we need to build this pipeline. And we're very intentional about it. When we receive teams from the federations, we ask them, where are the women? Make sure that when you bring me a team, and I'm not saying bring me a team, bring me a woman just because it's a woman. I want to make sure that you bring me women that can deliver, but you can't just expect them to deliver. Let's invest in them first. Let's make sure that we expose them to these international games. Let's make sure that our women, they get the exposure that they need before they can even represent the country. So for me, it's that intention. It's being intentional about why we have to invest in women and why we have to make sure that our resources, as an organization, are also, given towards women.
Why are we still sitting with a case where the investment case in women must still be made? It's 2026. Women's sport, women athletes, it seems that organizations must still be convinced, corporates must still be convinced from a grassroots level. Why is that the case?
It's legacy issues that we're dealing with. We're trying to change the narrative. Sport has always been about men for a very long time. Now, trying to change the narrative requires that we do what you are asking me now, to actually be intentional about it. Otherwise, the narrative will stay the same. So unfortunately, that's what we have to deal with. And I'm hoping that, when you leave, when we leave the positions that we're in now, you look back and say, no, I can see that I've really made a difference in the organization, whether it's, towards the women, the youth, disabled disability sport and all those things, all those sections of the society that have been neglected. I think for me, if I look back in 10 years' time, I want to say that I've made a difference in the lives of the people that are around me, whether it's leadership, whether it's with the athletes that we serve, whether it's with the organization that I work for, but I would like to look back and be comfortable and happy that I've achieved one of the things that I wanted to achieve, which is changing the narrative.
I appreciate what you're both talking about in terms of we still sit here today and we're trying to justify why women must be funded, why we must have parity when it comes to sporting codes. And I've seen that in other countries. They've actually managed to achieve that, where it's made very clear that, in fact, there's no difference between a women's team and a male team, and that parity should be there. I think what's also important when it comes to sport, sport achieves in 90 minutes what politics sometimes struggles to achieve in years. In 90 minutes, you just drive this cohesion. We have what I always refer to as country moments, and it makes South Africans, particularly because South African is really a sports nation, and South Africans then become part of one story in 90 minutes, what is it, Nozipho, about sport that literally has that power? And how can we utilize it in a better manner to really galvanize South Africans?
They always refer to the happiness index, Kuti. When the Springboks are winning, when the South African teams are winning. I mean, we've just come back now from Glasgow, and we brought back 28 medals. And everyone was watching those games. Everyone was so excited to see these young, we were talking about Dumi, not just now, these young athletes that are really breaking those barriers. And we always refer to sport as a unifier. When we're wearing that green and gold, everyone at the stadium is wearing green and gold. By that time, there's no one who's a Kaizer Chiefs or a Pirates or whatever political party. We're all the same. And the hashtag that we use at SASCOC is hashtag for my country, And what it means is that when you go out there to represent your country, you are representing your country, you are wearing green and gold, and you've got 64 million behind you. That's the beauty of sport. And when we go to the Olympics and we've got that gold and you hear the national anthem somewhere in London or somewhere in Europe, you can't help it but to just be emotional and want to cry when our athletes are doing what they're doing out there. But for me, when the president does his State of the Nation address, I wish he could realize the power of sport. When he's putting out his top 10 priorities, I wish we could have sport as one of them because of the power that sport has in uniting the nation. So if we can get sport to that level, to me, that would really be a great idea.
Nozipho, I thought you were going to say that you wish you could have sport as part of the State of the Nation. So we have 45 minutes of the Springboks and then the State of the Nation in between and then the rest of the game afterwards.
Prioritize. I just want him to prioritize. Sports must be the top 10 priorities. I understand government has got other priorities, but if they can realize the power of sport, I think the president can do it.
I think what you're saying is so critical because I'm sitting here with a public broadcaster, 19 radio stations, 5 TV channels, and really access to the biggest audience in South Africa. And I know that one of the key things when we talk about changing, the system that we find is ensuring that all South Africans have access to their national team. I genuinely believe that watching your national team should not be only for the ones who have. Every South African has the right to watch Bafana, the Proteas, the Springboks, the Commonwealth Games, etc. And they have to grow up, supporting their team and also being part of those country moments. Country moments cannot be exclusive moments. All of us must participate in it. From where you sit, Nozipho, what would you like broadcasters such as the SABC to do differently or more boldly for women's sport?
Give us more airtime. I always want to go back to this word, be intentional about it, I know you get a lot of requests. There's this, there's that. I think being intentional about investing in women's sports, being intentional about, providing the airtime. Give women more exposure, because when we go out to look for sponsorships, and when we look at the audiences, they'll tell you, sorry, we can't, if you compare this one to this one, there's more value or there's more return on investment on the male one. And it's the responsibility of the broadcasters as well to make sure that those women are profiled properly, but at the same time they get the exposure that they need, so that tomorrow when I say Nomsa, nobody must say, who's Nomsa Konj? They must know, oh, Nomsa, the cricketer. That's the kind of environment that we're looking for from a broadcaster, because we need to start profiling these women. I mean, if you ask who's playing now in Banyana, maybe you'll remember 2 or 3 players, because they're not properly profiled out there. So I think for me, it's the responsibility of the broadcasters to give those players the exposure that they need, because so that they can also bring in, sponsors and all those other things.
And sure, when we think about it, right, and with the men's sport, South Africans will know almost the entire Bafana squad. And you're so right when it comes to the women's sport. But in what ways do you think the profiling is not happening? Because there seems to be a vicious cycle, right? So they're not exposed, they're not in the public eye. And then you also have the case where Nomsa is sitting there and she's having to make a case. Okay, or maybe not Nomsa, but maybe one of the managers having to make a case about which game do we show. You go to women's sport, and unfortunately, the numbers of just people attending the games in and of itself is also poor. So the culture shift, to me, seems to be one that needs to be taking place nationally, that we also need men to go out and support women's sports in the way that they support men's sport, because it's not like people stop liking soccer just because they're women playing. That doesn't even make sense.
I actually enjoyed the Netball World Cup. If you remember, in Cape Town, there were so many men who were watching those games in Cape Town. And I thought that was a game changer. But at the same time, when you look at a return on investment now, Nomsa, from an SABC point of view, I think you need to define it differently and say, instead of looking at the return on investment, when you analyze that proposal, you need to look at the impact, do an impact analysis. What impact will this have? Rather than how much money will I make out of it. But you also, look at the impact, because that's also very important. And I think we tend to forget the kind of impact that our decisions would have, because we want to look at it in a different way. How many cars am I going to sell? Or how many people or how many advertisers am I going to bring in? Forgetting that there's a bigger conversation that talks about the impact, because we're building this case of bringing more women. So rather than looking at your return on investment in a particular way, you look at the impact that your decision would have in what we're trying to achieve when it comes to women's sports.
And I appreciate what you're saying in terms of impact, because I think also there's an opportunity for us to look at sport beyond, let's say, participation and just and medals, etc., but look at real, genuine impact in communities and impact, obviously, with the individuals themselves who participate in those sporting codes. I think what's important is that we tend to talk about sponsorship of sport. However, I tend to think that there's a bigger conversation regarding the long-term sustainability of women's sport and the role also that corporates should play. I don't think it should be just about we coming in to sponsor a particular sporting code because it speaks to our brand. But it's more looking at the long-term sustainability, and to our earlier point, to say sports achieves what a lot of other activities don't achieve, particularly when it comes to nation building. So I think it's just some of the things that we need to look at in terms of how then, as broadcasters, as federations, as yourselves at SASCOC, etc., how do we then, as a collective drive, that burning coalition, the burning platform, to say that then what is required to genuinely change the mindset and develop women's sport? We've seen it in other countries. You know, we've seen some of the greatest sports people being female. Look at the tennis legacy that has existed. You know, it started years ago. It didn't start with the Williams sisters. It's just that when it came in, it brought in representation, particularly from women who look like me, who all of a sudden saw themselves on the screen playing sport beyond and being the greatest of all times. So for me, I genuinely believe that when we look at sport in South Africa, we haven't even begun to scrape at the surface, if you think about it, because we just haven't done enough from a development perspective to bring those young people, particularly those young women, to participate. But
if you look at school sports in the country, you know, that's where it all starts, you know, more from a participation point of view. We still have a lot to do when it comes to school sports, because that's where you identify the talent. You know, most of the elite athletes that we have were identified at school. You know, so if we get that one right, clubs in the communities, that's where you find a talent. So for me, that's where the development starts. And if we can get that one right, I think we will. There's so much talent in this country that we have not really tapped into it.
So just looking at that, and we are coming towards the end of our conversation, and it's been a very insightful and inspiring conversation. After everything that you've told us this morning, what is the one thing that you'd like us to walk away understanding in terms of the world in which you are traversing, the world of sport? You were talking now about ensuring that from a development, from a sports perspective at school, that there is that type of focus and that investment. What is the one thing that you would want us to know as a nation?
I always talk about sport as a movement. You know, sport should not just be about, I know we get measured about the medals that we bring back and all these other performance measures, but I think for me, sport teaches you discipline. Sport teaches you all sorts of other, you know, the other things that you learn through sports. And for me, if we can get government, if we can get broadcasters, if we can get corporate South Africa behind sports, I think we'll do wonders. And I mean, as a leader, as I said earlier on, I feel like I'm stronger than what I thought, because this is not an easy path. But sports is exciting. Sports build communities, and if we can invest more in sports, I think we'll go a long way.
Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end, but only for today. Nozipho, thank you so much for coming into our studio here at the SABC for this important conversation with our CEO, Nomsa Chabeli. Remember, next week, she's back between 11 and 12 on Friday. The guests will be unveiled. You know, it's a surprise. She wants to surprise us every week in terms of who she's putting in this not so hot seat. It's a nice warm seat.
I think if it's on a Friday, let's do it at the golf course.
At the golf course. You did say you were a golfer. Nomsa, thank you so much. Nozipho, thank you so much. That's where we leave it for the Daily Discourse. John Joseph back with you again Monday between 9 and 12 a.m. Please stay tuned to SAfm. Up next, the update at noon.
It's 12 o'clock on Friday, the 14th of August, 2026. A very warm welcome to Update at Noon here on SAfm. Leading the conversation, I'm Sakina Kamwendo. Coming up in the next hour.
If the Commission were not to do that, it would itself not be taking its processes seriously. This is something that the Commission just has to do.
The Madlanga